Welcome to the Penguin Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Tate. Once again, a technical issue has prevented Nick and I from having a chat, but you will notice my voice sounds much better this week because I'm home and off the road. I got some strange stories from this last trip, but we'll save those for next week. Nick should be back next week. I know I keep making that promise, but this time I think it's a good one. Let's dive straight into our main event. Tony Cabral is a mainstay in the Boston magic scene. He's a sleight of hand artist with incredible chops, and what's more, he's one of the rare people who can make gambling demos fascinating. I first met Tony a couple years ago at the Pebble convention, and he showed me some amazing stuff. I grabbed some of his time via Zoom, and now you get to join our conversation. Tony Cabral, thanks so much for joining me here on the Penguin Magic Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you because I met you at the Pebble convention last year, and we became fast friends. And since then, I've been following the magic that you have put out in the past and the magic that you do, and you are no slouch when it comes to gambling stuff, my friend.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been an obsession for quite a while now. I was gonna say about 20, almost 30 years at this point. And I appreciate that.
I want to get to some of the way you present gambling in a little bit, because luminaries in the field like Michael Vincent and Darwin Ortiz have said very wonderful things about the way you present gambling. But let's start with what attracted you to it, because it's one of those things that when you become a magician, you either you get a pseudo gambling routine or you go all the way with the gambling stuff. What was it that attracted you to the gambling stuff?
It's funny you should mention that. So mind a little bit of background on me. If I hadn't told you before, I got into magic on my own. Well, I got into it as a kid. I got away from it when I discovered girls, and then somewhere in my early 20s, I went to Brown University, and they have a library there. It's a special collections library, the John Hay, and in that library is a collection formerly owned by H. Adrian Smith.
Okay.
And so basically, I was getting the bug back into card magic and everything, and I, typed into the card catalog, got 880 hits, and they were all in the Hay. They were all in the Smith collection, and I went, hot damn.
Yeah.
And so I started exploring, these books, and it was one of those things. Well, between the sort of stock library that Dover made available for a while. It was like Expert at the Card Table, Expert Card Technique, the Jean Hougard books, and Buckley's Card Control. There, all these books from like the 30s and 40s. There was that emphasis. There was an emphasis on some level of working on the card table stuff, the false shuffles, the deals, that kind of a thing. It was like I feel like it was sort of like the new hotness because of guys like Di Vernon and Charlie Miller and things like that. And then I discovered the Di Vernon Inner Secrets books, which has a lot of that stuff. The complete works of Derek Dingle, and Derek, did a lot of that kind of shuffling. And then Darwin Ortiz at the card table.
Yeah.
So without a mentor to sort of steer me into good taste, I just assumed that this is the kind of stuff you needed to learn in order to be a real card magician. And so I just, with nobody to tell me otherwise, I just rolled up my sleeves and, got working on that stuff, and then gravitating more towards Darwin's work, clearly, who became a very good friend, teacher and mentor. And it just sort of that was sort of the gradual leaning towards that. And then, through Darwin and Martin Nash, and then of course, discovering, Richard Turner and Steve Forte and guys like that. That was sort of where the path went. As far as, the kind of, performing these things, my two big heroes were Martin Nash, who
Hmm.
just had all that. He had the character. He had
He was
he
just charming as the day is long.
charming as the day is long, with a little bit of oil
Yeah.
and that little bit of well, something I'll get to in a second.
Hmm.
And then Darwin as well. And Darwin was such a great uh creator. As much as he was a gambling expert,
Hmm.
he knew um he knew how to create a trick that would speak to Vegas regulars, as well as, I think he used to say, if you can create a gambling routine that will appeal to pit bosses and also impress a busload of nuns,
Yeah.
uh, then then you're on the right track, because he knew, he was always, um he was very audience centric,
Hmm.
and he knew the idea was, I mean, you got to get everybody in the room. Everybody has to kind of come along for this ride, and everybody's played, some level of cards. Everybody has some sort of idea what it's like in a casino, whether they've actually been or not. So
You know,
you play to that when you're sort of drawing, when you're in front of a regular audience.
it's interesting. I
Um,
was just talking to somebody else about designing miracles, and
yeah.
for all of the theory books I've read, I feel like Darwin was the only one who really broke down the actual construction of the effects and hammered out like the difference between presentation, effect, affect on the audience, how the plot can be altered based on different things. And there's so many times we think about books on performance theory or performing as like, hey, here's how to be a better actor or something like that, whereas Darwin was actually cracking apart the DNA of the effects themselves.
Yeah, no, he was, and if you go back to the rest of the library,
Hmm.
which is over here, if you go back to the rest of the books, it's always been there.
Yeah.
It's in all the tricks, it's in all the explanations and the writing and whatnot. It's
Hmm.
there. And then when he finally broke it down
Hmm.
to, as well as the presentational stuff that ended up in strong magic, like,
Hmm.
it's there. He understood that there's a craft behind this.
Hmm.
And when you have a craft, you need a toolkit
Yes.
of some kind. You need the right brushes or paints or whatever. And he was very, very good at not only breaking that down but explaining it. That was
Hmm.
the other thing. He was he
Yeah.
was very good at articulating what went in, um, what went into, a well-constructed effect, a well-presented effect.
Hmm.
And again, this kind of getting back to the gambling stuff.
Hmm.
Um, when like most gambling material, or most card table techniques, by their nature, they're designed to look exactly the same. You
Yeah.
shuffle, you deal, you win. That's it.
Yeah.
And because they're meant to blend into regular card play. But when you get it in front of real humans, normal
Hmm.
humans, um, there is, I mean, you need to be able to differentiate
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
what you're showing, what you're demonstrating. And that was another part of Darwin's genius. If he was going to do a bottom deal demonstration,
Hmm.
and really wanted to emphasize the bottom deal, it's here, the aces go on the bottom, there's no shuffling, there's no cutting,
Hmm.
and here comes the deal.
Yeah.
If he was gonna do a stacking demonstration, they go on top. Here comes the shuffles. Is not a lot of you're very clearly delineating
Hmm.
uh, to your audience what the heck is going on, because it's very easy to get lost in the sameness of it all. But he was that was one thing I learned studying his work, was that sort of clarity
Hmm.
is the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it's like it's also kind of interesting because like in general, people are like, oh, I'd love to take you to a casino. When they forget that like there's people and procedures in place. Also, like, you're not allowed to touch the cards. Like, I'm not going to be the dealer at the blackjack table. Really, what I'm showing you is like, it's antiques. It's almost like it's more like I'm a Civil War reenactor without a gun than I am.
There's an element there is that element to it. But also, I mean, it's that, and of course there are ways. It's not like people have stopped cheating in casinos
or even home games where that kind of thing, or private games where that would be
or even in home games. It's not like that's gone completely the way of the dodo.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of those things that you're playing into everybody's sense of everybody knows what it's like to be in a card game, and oh, I was hoping to get a card that when it ended up over there, and I was hoping to get this card, and if pick them up, it's a good hand, it's a bad hand. Everybody has that sensation, and plus it's tied to money, really. Money and good fortune and everything like that. And getting back to something I was gonna talk about, something I mentioned about Martin and Darwin and guys like Jason Ledany. When you're it becomes a character choice at some point, because it's not enough for you to demonstrate these techniques or just to be able to say you can do them. Your audience wants that sensation that you might.
Yeah.
You might be that kind of person. You might be. I mean, ultimately, it's like, hey, are you a criminal? It's right. But,
yes, yes, I am.
Yes, right. But they want, but they want that sensation. They want that. I've likened it to, if you're going to be the shark, they want to be in the shark cage.
Yeah.
Just to kind of feel that for a second without having to cough over a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that leads to lines when I introduce myself. It's all, my name's Tony Cabral. I specialize in card cheating for entertainment purposes only. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And is it just that little bit gives, it's like, what are you not telling us? It's like quite a bit. But it's that kind of a thing. That's what, again, Martin had it, Darwin has it, Jay's got it. So you kind of feed into that, feed into that wish fulfillment on the audience's side. Like, was it Darwin's old line is either Darwin or Andrew Wimhurst. I think this is Andrew's version, which is, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, ooh, if I had his hands and my morals. That's what the audience is. Every time they're, if you're doing it
that's
properly.
A spectacular line.
Exactly. I mean, that's part of the appeal there.
Yeah. It's there is something like terribly romantic about the idea of being able to alter the outcome of a game of chance. Even if like, and the effects that you perform are surefire every time and may not involve the actual card table methods, but they give the feeling that it is, which is, I think, what is so terribly interesting to me, because I remember doing gambling demos when I was younger and not getting much of a reaction, because for me, the experience was exactly what you're talking about, where I've got all these different things that I'm doing, but to the audience's perspective, it's all exactly the same. He's just dealing cards off the top of the deck and getting the same thing over and over again, which is why, like, for my money, I think that the ability to present like a classic magic effect in the gambling realm so it feels like a gambling thing is such a unique skill. Like, the Mayhew poker deal is a great example of, it's not a real cheating demonstration, but it feels like this person can deal from the center whenever they want. And it almost provides a better experience for the lay audience than an actual center dealing demonstration would. Does that make sense?
No, that makes absolute sense. In fact, I'll go so much further as to say, as someone who has worked up a working center deal, you never get as good reactions as some of the best pseudo deals that I know. Like, Darwin had face up centers, which was an old court idea, and there's another one I hesitate to name just because I screwed that up for myself one time.
Yeah, don't tell people the tricks you love, because then they'll go do them.
Well, that's the thing. This was one that was it was a very good, it was a demonstration that was shown to me. It was actually my very first convention. It was and someone who's also has become a very dear friend. He shows us this demonstration over breakfast, and then teaches it to us. And I was like, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. And it's center deal. It's center dealing.
Yeah. Big heavy quotes for the audio listeners to the podcast.
Yes, I'm gonna. I'll flap them harder.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I learned it, and I've been doing it ever since. But I made the mistake one time at it was some magicians gathering where I was I did the thing, and then there was that. I'm never quite used to dealing with magicians where that sort of awkward silence where they're not completely ready to just go, wow, that was amazing. They're like, oh, they're trying to formulate, interesting use of that principle, and they have no idea what you did.
Yeah.
So it's like they're just it was sitting there, and I stepped in the silence because I'm that kind of weirdo, and I was like, that's not bad for a pseudo deal, right? And he goes, that was a pseudo deal. Damn it. I realized for a long time, I should just be doing this. I should be just doing this for everybody and saying nothing about it.
Take the win, Tony. Just take the win.
I know. What I should have said was nothing. Yeah, but it's but I've done that. On certain things. Again, when a lot of people start to do this kind of material, part of it, again, is have you made the character choice? Have you made the decision? Why are you someone who does this?
Yeah.
What about you? And a lot of particularly, I have younger students who love doing this stuff, but they have yet to find the part of them that successfully sort of sells it.
Yeah.
You could be the person across the table and everybody's like, ooh, I don't want, like there's, I don't know what it is about me. There is something about me that says near to well. It always has been. And, I haven't really gotten in any trouble in my life, but there's something about this that, that people seem to expect I'm going to try to pull something, or I'm on that. And maybe it's because I wrote an essay in my first set of lecture notes called Groucho and Me.
Yeah.
And the idea was, again, speaking to this sort of character thing. I've been a long time Groucho Marx fan, and that sort of invaded my personality a long time ago. And the thing is when you in entertainment, when you have particularly comedians, you have like characters like the Marx Brothers, or back then it was Neil Patrick Harris on How I Met Your Mother. Some of the person that one weird character who's in real life would be a completely terrible person.
Yeah.
For some reason you enjoy watching them try to get away with stuff. Like the Marx Brothers, they were taking down authority left and right, and Groucho would say horrible things to people, and horrible things to women, horrible things to Margaret Dumont, who he was trying, like, he would ultimately end up with at the end of the movie. He's hi Emily, I can see you now bending over a hot stove. Only I can't see the stove. It's just things like that.
Yeah.
But there's something about them that makes you laugh, makes you smile, makes you want to see them keep doing this weird thing. And so
I think it sort of relates to the baser instinct in us where I think, like, as like productive members of society, we try and hold ourselves to a certain standard, and we treat other people the way we would like to be treated. But every once in a while you wish you could get away with being a jerk to someone who deserved it. And so, like, when you see that in a character, you're like identifying with like a secret part of yourself that you probably feel a little shame about, but you're like relishing the fact in others people. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Mhm.
absolutely correct. We want to be the one with the snappy comeback. We want to be the
Yeah.
one, who can you know, get the something for nothing.
Yes.
There's I remember I was watching it was a British panel show called QI, and at some point the
Love
discussion
that
turned to the
show.
idea that apparently it's something very close to like like Americans
Hmm.
for some reason we love a criminal.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the people like like you hear stories about gangsters in the early days, Bonnie and Clyde and Al
Yeah.
Capone and people like that who had that. I mean, they were literal criminals,
Hmm.
and but there was that sort of popular perception where they had more than their share of kind of fans.
Hmm.
It's where you would think purely the pure reaction would be, well, lock these people up. It's like, well, they're getting theirs.
Yeah. Well, like
It's a very weird thing.
on some level, I think maybe the magician's fascination with the gambler is that sort of the lawbreaker who doesn't hurt someone, right? Because like the idea of like stealing money in a game of chance or swindling someone out of some pocket money is like it's larcenous, but it's not terribly damaging, right? At least the idea is that it's not terribly damaging.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
actually, most people, when no one ever says. I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I would take that to my home game
Yeah.
and rip off my friends." That's not where, that's not where it goes. It's always the casino. It's
It's
always
it's like a
the punching up to,
Robin
here's
Hood
the big
complex.
faceless corporation that's just designed to suck money out of your pockets. Like, oh boy, if I could
Yeah.
just get back to, if I could get some of that back, that kind of a thing. So that's some of it. No, but I've very few. I don't think I've run into anybody who again, you said, like,
Mhm.
doing it but not hurting someone. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's ever really made that leap to like, yeah, I'm going to rip off Charlie next week at
Well,
the.
maybe me, but
Well, yeah, we'll save it. Yeah.
so
I've done
what?
that engaged family.
How did you come to your character decisions that allow you to present the gambling stuff in? I mean, we've talked about how you feel like people can sort of interpret you as a ne'er do well, but you must lean into that a little bit. But there's got to be other choices as to like the one that you said, or the sort of question you asked the ether was. Why are you explaining this? Why are you showing this to people? I think that's a really interesting thing that you must have wrestled with.
Well, it's um it's funny. Sometimes, I mean, when I was back when I had my weekly bar gig and
Mhm.
would have, I mean, these conversations would actually come up quite often.
Yeah.
There would be a little bit of performance, and then people, asking, "What's your deal?"
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, so um, and it was, I mean, the sort of direct hanging a lampshade answer that I would
Mhm.
give people about this and why I wasn't off somewhere actively being a criminal was, I'd say, well, number one, when you learn these techniques, they're going to pay for themselves one way or another. And this way, I get to indulge in my second favorite activity, which is attracting attention to myself. Yeah. Which, which is very honest.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very honest and very direct. So, so it's, sometimes in situations like that,
Mhm.
I feel like it pays to be honest.
Mhm.
Sometimes I get by better with lies of omission.
Mhm.
People I've had people ask, "Oh, are you allowed in the casino?" And then I've got glib answers, and
Mhm.
occasionally I'll look to somebody and say, "Well, since I'm not allowed to pat you down to see if you're wearing a wire, how about
Mhm.
we move on to another topic?" It's just, which is doesn't address the question, but it
Yeah.
kind of addresses the question.
Now,
Um,
do you take the gambling? style routine onto the stage in a parlor or a stage format? And if you do, how do you make that leap?
That's a very interesting question. I haven't done a lot of I haven't done a lot of like parlor
Mm-hmm.
type work. I mean, I've done a strolling and walk around, which
Mm-hmm.
is which sort of relates to that in the
Yeah.
sense that, to be able to go around from group to group and do stuff that still speaks to my, again, character choice, but then it's not like I'm carrying a poker table around with me.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
can't do stand poker deals. So um you find other routines, other
Mm-hmm.
um demonstrations that, you know, again, sort of speak to that and can be colored that way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, was it Eddie Fechter's "Be Honest, What Is It?"
Yeah.
That, yeah, so you've got the two black aces that go down in the hand, and then
Mm-hmm.
they come out of the pocket, and you've got two aces in you've got two red aces in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually in routine, I'm like, well, I hate to break up a set, so here we
Mm-hmm.
go, and
Yeah.
then you still ending with four aces.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about you're openly talking about, switching cards,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll completely relate that to a card table thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the another cool thing that I got studying Darwin um was finding ways to um turn certain tricks into, like, you're more in the gambling vein.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered the proposition bet framework for a
Yeah.
lot of things. Covers a lot of ground. He Yeah, because he would do his version of Roy Walton's Smiling Mule,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd color it as do you know what a proposition bet is? A proposition bet is something that, so you've already you're now
Mm-hmm.
hanging that context on it,
Yeah.
and it's a sandwich trick.
Yeah.
It's
It's a great sandwich trick.
it's a great sandwich trick.
And
But it's also something I discovered about that, which makes it really good on certain, to present certain things that might not normally be seen as gambling.
mhm,
Is I realize that they have to, a proposition bet is the kind of bet, sounds like you can't lose, but you really can't win.
mhm,
And there's two ways out of a proposition bet.
mhm,
One is the cheap joke,
yeah.
and the other is a miracle.
Mhm,
And you see, like, that's actually just perfectly describes the structure of Smiling Mule.
yeah.
You've got a cheap joke, and then you've got a miracle. And I've done that. When I was at the bar, I would do coin through ring
Mhm,
after Del Rey's routine, and that's exactly how I would present that. It's a proposition bet, and the first thing, oh, I bet you can't push the coin through the ring.
mhm,
Then you take the ring off and you push the coin through the ring,
mhm,
and then you go into the routine where it actually does go through the ring. It's just a little thing,
mhm,
little things like that. I did try one. Was it when we started doing when the Boston Magic Lab started
mhm,
doing live shows again?
mhm.
I opened that show
Yeah.
and gave it I gave sort of a stand-up parlor type thing a shot. It was basically going through some of the routines that I have. I did have a little tabletop,
Mhm,
so I was able to um I was able to do some of the stuff that I do, but it wasn't like, I've since gotten around to whenever I am back on that show, I'll bring my own table.
yeah.
I know exactly where, I know the room and I can put it down. But it's yeah, so I mean, you basically have to be conscious. I mean, you have to be either way.
Yeah.
When you're working on the tabletop, or you have to be conscious of
Mhm,
just being up and out
yeah.
as a performer. It doesn't matter whether you're doing,
I
you know
knew
what.
you worked the Boston Magic Lab, which is why I asked if you took that to the parlor or the stage. But
Yeah, yeah. I tried it. I tried it once, and then somebody else. It was our friend Jacob Greenwald.
yeah.
No, somebody else had brought a table, and
Mhm,
then Jacob decided, oh well, if there's a table, I'm going to use the table. And I don't think I was actually at that show,
yeah.
but I was. Once I found, I was like, wait a minute, I can bring a table? Why the hell am I farting around with this other stuff? So it kind of I kind of dragged myself away from the parlor experiment. But there are certain things that I do that I can, again,
Mhm,
present, maybe not technically, but presentationally,
Mhm.
you can fold it into.
S-
Um,
So I have this question for you then, and I don't know if
okay.
you've considered this or not, but like, so the coin through ring is a really great example of uh, taking a magic trick and
Mhm.
setting it up as a gambling presentation by doing this proposition bet. And as you said, the proposition bet ends either with a cheap joke or an absolute miracle. The question is, if you're like a hustler, or or you're a gambling, you're a shark, you're a ne'er do well, whatever it is, the what is the sort of inner monologue around that, or what is the presentational thing? Because you're not doing a magic trick, right? Because you're doing a proposition bet. It's not real magic, because if you were using magic to win the bet, like that's
Right.
like the idea of a proposition bet is that you know something they don't, you solve the puzzle, not you have mystical powers from the beyond. Where do you how do you sort of reconcile that? Because I'm not saying it's wrong to dress something up as a proposition bet. I'm just wondering
Right.
how you reconcile it with your character.
Well, I also don't, again, I
Mm-hmm.
don't sell myself as I don't sell myself as a magician,
Mm-hmm.
with supernatural powers.
Yeah.
However, one thing I've discovered is that to just call what I do sleight of hand
Mm-hmm.
is like it steps into that sort of, I don't want to say, I don't think MacGuffin is the right is the right term, but the idea is like when you say, "How did you do that?" Well,
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
If you ask me that question, "How did you do that?" I would say sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Now, the fun of it is when sleight of hand does not explain what most people think of as sleight of hand, does not
Yeah.
explain what they just saw,
Yeah.
and they're thinking in a couple different directions. And I've always said that, when you tell people what you're doing is sleight of hand, they don't really understand the complexities of it. It might
Mm-hmm.
as well be a superpower as far
Yeah.
as they're concerned. I've actually
Mm-hmm.
I put that into a script one time. That people, when you say sleight of hand, people think you're moving faster than the speed of light. Um, and
Yeah.
and then a Groucho joke followed. But it's to and it's funny how particularly if you're working, from a technical and construction standpoint. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
trying to blow my own horn here,
Yeah.
but when the material is right
Yeah.
and you're just blithely saying,
Mm-hmm.
it's sleight of hand,
Mm-hmm.
you get people watching, and it's like Darwin said in Designing Miracles. If you get them sitting, they come back at you with like, "I'm watching you and you didn't do anything."
Yeah. Yeah.
If they're thinking that and you're still insisting, "Oh, it's sleight of hand, sleight of hand, sleight of hand, sleight of hand." Yeah, it's funny.
It,
Uh,
it just falls into that,
one
like the.
one place where I disagree with the jerks
Mhm.
is I've gotten so many people with producing the producing a chosen card from the pocket, or
Mhm.
you do it as a gag,
Yeah.
or at the end of a trick or something like that, and I constantly have people asking me, how the hell does it keep getting in there?
Yeah.
Or what's up with the jacket?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things we as magicians know it's a rock stupid thing,
Mm-hmm.
because you're actually just,
Mm-hmm.
you're faking it.
Yeah.
But to do it, if you do it well and you do it correctly,
Mm-hmm.
um, it it bamboozles a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
Michael Skinner said that on the tapes.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about using it as an out for a thought of card,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, yeah, he's like, we think it's stupid, and we're embarrassed to have to go that route,
Yeah.
and people still react to it as a miracle, And it also helps when you palm like Michael Skinner.
Yeah.
I had a magician, a local friend of mine, lab guy, asked me. He was asking me about um, a production technique from the pocket
Mm-hmm.
that he swore he's seen me do. He's seen me do almost every time he sees me perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and he's like, "Do you have any tips on it?" And he was doing it. Was one of these. It was one of these things where you can show a bare hand and then come in and you've,
And you don't
and it was
you
one
don't
of
do it at all.
I looked, I was like, that's nice. I've never done that. I've never done that. This is just,
Yeah.
it's just pure, this is foundational, palming technique 101. It's just, it's very, you just, as long as you're, it's like that kind of thing. And he didn't believe me for a second.
Yeah. It's interesting because like just like go ahead and telling your audience that it's sleight of hand is interesting because it sort of falls under that same area of any science sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, pretty much.
So any sleight of hand sufficiently competent is indistinguishable from magic. And it
Well, that's, yeah.
it provides a natural end point for the layperson's curiosity where they're like, well, obviously it was sleight of hand. But like, oh, it's so good. And it's interesting.
Right, but they have nothing to they have nothing to formally hang the hat on. They're just like, he's doing something. And they always say the same thing.
Yeah.
I was watching, I couldn't see a damn thing.
Yeah. And
they could, and it also helps again when you're constructing things, to keep banging that gun.
Yeah.
When you're constructing things properly, there was a lot, if you there's like Darwin I think was the one that coined it, was the must believe test. It's like, what must your audience believe in order for this thing to be perceived as a miracle?
Yeah.
And if you know those moments and you know those bits, and you sell them and you're asking questions where the only thing they can ask, the only way they can answer is yes, then you're emphasizing, if I go to shuffle the cards and I spread them out and they're, you can see the weave, and I'm like, is this a genuine shuffle?
Yeah.
And they're look at it and they're going to say yes, and I say, you go ahead and finish that for me. And then so now it's like the old Ascanio quote, there's nothing more overwhelming than the truth.
Yeah.
You're either hitting them with something they can't deny, or you've sort of mentally backed them into a corner where, that's the only answer they know that's the only answer they can give. But by giving that answer, they have now roped themselves into the lie that actually. Does that make sense? It's like,
yeah.
You get them to fess up, and you've got them in that weird little zugzwang territory where they say yes, the answer is no, but they're now fully committed to believing, believing what you set up.
They've roped themselves into an uncomfortable answer that is not only incorrect, but one that they supplied.
Yes. I'll give you an example. So I have a handling of the Biddle trick, invisible card, and it's the way I go through it is their cards shuffled into this packet, and I'm showing them the cards. I say, do you see your card there? And and they say yes. I look over the cards. You look at the cards. I'm going to look at you. Do you see your card there? Okay. And then I go through and I'm eliminating some, and I come out with it said, do you still see your card in there? And they say yes. It's like it's in there, it's constantly in there. Yes, they have to because it's there. So I say, I'm going to get this down to 5. Now don't let down, and then you name the 5 cards. And I say, you know what? Before you say anything, I'm going to commit to these 5 cards, put the rest of the deck over here. And I've named the card. They've heard me name the cards as I go through. And I say yes or no, was your card one of these 5? They always say yes. Which is interesting to me because by that point, the answer to the question, is your card one of these 5? Number 1, there's only 4. Number 2, the card was there, but it's already over here. So when they say yes, it's like you've got them.
Yeah.
So then when it becomes, I'll actually, I will do things like this. I'm like, oh, let me just cast a shadow over this. And I pitch out 4 cards, and then I pick them back up and I say, do you still see your card here? And now the answer is no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's getting to, I was so happy when I thought up that structure, getting to that point where you've just been beating them over the head, and then you ask them that one question, and they always get a yes. And it's like, already then, it's a that kind of a thing. But the rest of the time, again, I really, there's really something satisfying about actually giving people things that they can't deny. Like, are these genuinely shuffled? Did you shuffle those cards? Are these coming off the top? And then they're waiting for you to do the move, and the move never comes. Or else, like I said before, the move happened under their nose and they completely missed it.
Well, Tony, I have had an absolute blast talking with you. I think we're about out of time, but we'll just have to have you back on sometime, because I could talk to you for weeks and weeks and weeks.
I'm not short on verbiage.
No. Well, people can see you at the Boston Magic Lab, and where else can people find out more about your magic and where you're going to be performing soon?
Oh, geez, that's the little question. The lab is actually off for the summer.
Okay.
We're going to be coming back in the fall, September, October, with live shows at the Rossi Square Theater.
Excellent.
First Thursday every month. I'm not always on the show, but it's a great show.
Excellent.
And as for everything else, I'm still for want of a regular venue. But been doing private parties, corporate functions, a little bit more lecturing these days. So,
excellent.
Again, something of an underground legend. I've got talent, and I'm shit at marketing.
Hey, if it weren't for Penguin, no one would know who I was either. So, Tony, thanks so much for joining us here on the Penguin Magic Podcast.
All right, thanks for having me, Erik.
That's going to do it for this week, kids. Thanks so much to Tony for being on the show, and thanks to you for listening. Well, kids, my travel schedule has calmed down for now, so I'll be sticking around close here to Columbus. But that means I'll be spending more time at my restaurant gig at Town Hall working on some exciting new effects. I've got some great new tricks and even a release of my own in the pipeline, and I can't wait to share it with you. My next trip out of town to see Penguin fans is going to be in Tacoma, July 10th through the 13th for the IBM International Convention. I look forward to seeing all of the Penguin fans there, as we are, and as always, we're a weekly podcast, so be sure to like and subscribe, as well as share your favorite episodes on the social media platform that you've been looking for insane vending machines on. If you wanted to reach out to me about anything on this week's show, you'll have to sneak it inside of a Lunchable at the Lunchables vending machine in the Dallas airport. Seriously, I saw a Lunchables vending machine during my travels, because who doesn't want to board a far flight home right after eating what I can only describe as ham that should be spelled with a Y, cheese that should be spelled with a question mark, and then wash it down with a lukewarm Capri Sun. But if absolutely awful ideas for vending machines aren't your cup of tea, you can always hit me up on Instagram at Erik Tait. That's at ERIKTAIT. From me and everyone else here at the P3 Magic Studios, practice, perform.